What if I told you one man helped save over 80 million lives, but isn't a household name? While Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin, it was an unassuming Australian pathologist who turned it into a life-saving miracle. This is the untold story of Howard Florey, the man who transformed medicine and changed the course of history. From the quiet streets of Adelaide to the halls of Oxford and the battlefields of World War II, his work reshaped the modern world. Prepare to meet the scientists behind the cure. Howard Walter Florey, Baron Florey, born on the 24th of September 1898 and passed away on the 21st of February 1968, was an Australian pharmacologist and pathologist, best known for his role in developing penicillin. Though Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in 1928, it was Florey and his team who transformed it into a practical drug through purification, mass production, and clinical trials. For this achievement, he shared the 1945 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine with Ernst Boris Chain and Fleming. Florey held academic posts at the University of Cambridge from 1926 to 1931, the University of Sheffield from 1932 to 1935, and finally the University of Oxford. At Cambridge, he worked on lysozyme and formed a long-term collaboration with technician Jim Kent. In Sheffield, he revitalized the pathology department and researched lysozyme, lymphatics, and tetanus. At Oxford, Florey was appointed Professor of Pathology and became Director of the Sir William Dunn School of Pathology. There, he built a pioneering interdisciplinary team, including Chain, Kent, and Norman Heatley, and secured Rockefeller and MRC funding. In 1938, Florey's team began working on penicillin. Fleming had discovered its antibacterial effects, but no one had made it into a usable drug. Florey's team isolated the active compound and developed methods for its purification and large-scale production. They first tested penicillin on mice in 1940, followed by successful human trials in 1941. The war made large-scale production urgent, and Florey traveled to the United States, where he worked with American companies and researchers to begin mass production. By D-Day in 1944, enough penicillin had been made to treat all Allied wounded soldiers. In 1941, Florey visited the United States to secure industrial support. He also visited Canada, where he collaborated with Connaught Laboratories. After the war, Florey continued to travel widely and advised many countries. In North Africa, penicillin was tested in military hospitals. Florey also visited the Soviet Union, where he was warmly received. Back in Australia, Florey had always maintained ties. He consulted on national research policy and helped establish medical research institutions. His leadership helped shape the post-war landscape of medical science. One of the most prestigious institutions in the UK was the Royal Society. Mellanby put Florey's name forward for membership in 1937, but at that time it accepted only 20 new members each year. He was elected a Fellow in 1941. The Royal Society was governed by a council of 21 Fellows, and Florey served on the council from 1942 to 1943, and again from 1951 to 1953, when he was Vice President. He received the Royal Society's Royal Medal in 1951 and its Copley Medal in 1957. By custom, the President of the Royal Society served for 5 years, and the position alternated between the mathematical and physical sciences and the biological sciences, so Florey was eligible in 1960. Since the President was a public figure, his private life had to be beyond reproach, which was a sore point due to his relationship with Margaret Jennings. Florey became the President of the Royal Society on November 30th, 1960. Since 1873, the Royal Society had occupied Burlington House. While it had a sumptuous meeting room and council room, the administrative staff, who numbered about 70 in 1960, worked in cramped conditions in the awkward-to-access offices in the attic and basement. Florey decided to seek better accommodation. In December 1960, Florey was informed that plans to build new accommodation for the Foreign Office at Carlton House Terrace had fallen through. and that the Crown Estate Commissioners had suggested that the premises might be suitable for the headquarters of cultural bodies. Florey inspected the property and lodged a formal application to occupy 4 houses on the site, numbers 6 to 9. Florey raised the money required to realise the architect Sir William Holford's vision for the interiors. While the government paid the rent and upkeep on the Royal Society's accommodation, about £45,000 in 1963, repairs and alterations were at the Royal Society's expense and ultimately came to around £850,000. The move was not completed during Florey's term of office. The new building was opened by Queen Elizabeth II on November 21, 1967. Florey pursued a more progressive and internationalist outlook for the Royal Society. He hosted Yuri Gagarin at a luncheon at Burlington House and led Royal Society visits to Russia in 1965 and 1967. He saw that Britain's future lay in being part of the European Economic Community, and he established ties with the European Organization for Nuclear Research, the European Molecular Biology Organization, and the European Space Research Organization. In 1959, the Royal Society provided for only one research fellowship, the Fullerton Professorship. But in 1961, at his suggestion, the Henry Dale Research Professorship was created for a researcher in physiology and pharmacology. Government funding was provided to create 3 more professorships in 1964 and another 2 in 1967. Reflecting his attempt to move with the times, a chair was established for the social sciences, and 2 new lecture series were instituted for technology and the behavioral sciences. Aware of the acute danger of overpopulation that the life-saving drugs that he had pioneered could cause, he established a population study group, and in 1967 he became the president of the Family Planning Association. As he approached the age of 60, Florey faced mandatory retirement. He had to vacate the university house he had occupied since 1935, which was subsequently demolished, with a new school erected on the site. He bought a parcel of land in Marston, Oxford, and built a house on it. No sooner had they moved in than Florey accepted the position of Provost of the Queen's College, Oxford, to which he was elected on June 25, 1962, and he moved into the Provost's lodgings. This meant relinquishing his chair at the Sir William Dunn School. He was succeeded by Henry Harris, a fellow Australian scientist who had been invited to study at the Sir William Dunn School by Florey in 1952 on an ANU scholarship. Florey was the first provost of Queen's College with no prior association with the college as an undergraduate, graduate researcher or fellow, and the first scientist. The role was closely associated with the academic establishment, of which he had been critical, but he could stay until 1971. The lodgings came with a housekeeper, and he could make use of its facilities to entertain visiting scientists and dignitaries. Florey had a lift installed to make it easier for Ethel and himself to reach the upstairs bedrooms. Based on his own experience as a Rhodes Scholar, Florey created a version for European students. The European Studentship Scheme provided support for graduates from 11 Western European and Scandinavian countries with an annual stipend of £1,100 for 2 years. Florey raised the money for 9 studentships. Florey did not live to see the first studentship awarded in 1969, and without him additional funding was not forthcoming and the money was exhausted by 1980. By then, 76 students had benefited from the scheme, and they had published 15 books and 250 articles in peer-reviewed journals. During his term as provost, there was a major construction program to provide enough accommodation for all undergraduates to be able to spend at least 2 years in residence. This involved 3 developments, the largest of which was Florey's personal project, the construction of a new building on the River Cherwell at St Clement, Oxford. The cost was substantial. The purchase price of the site alone was £500,000, but Florey was accustomed to raising large sums of money. It was designed by the British architect Sir James Stirling. Florey died the day that construction work was scheduled to begin. When the building was opened in 1971, it was named the Florey Building in his honour. Ethel Florey's health deteriorated. She had hypertension and respiratory and heart problems and walked with a stick. She travelled to Australia one more time in 1965 to give lectures on penicillin, but collapsed in Canberra and was hospitalised in Sydney. She recovered sufficiently to return to Oxford. When she found out that her son Charles was getting married at Fulton's house in New Haven in 1966, she wanted to attend. Florey refused to pay for this. If she collapsed in the United States, the cost of medical care would be astronomical. Robert Webb, an American friend from the Cambridge days, arranged for $5,000, equivalent to $48,000 in 2024, of insurance cover to allow her to attend. She died in Oxford on October 10, 1966. On June 6, 1967, Florey married Margaret Jennings at the old Register Office in St Giles and Oxford, in a ceremony deliberately kept as quiet as possible. The only other persons present were Jim Kent and Cecilia Little, Jennings's housekeeper, who acted as witnesses. There was a small celebration in Florey's rooms at Queen's College, and they honeymooned in the Caribbean before visiting Fulton in New Haven. Florey was awarded the Cameron Prize for Therapeutics of the University of Edinburgh and the Lister Medal in 1945 for his contributions to surgical science. The corresponding Lister oration, given at the Royal College of Surgeons of England later that year, was titled "Use of Microorganisms for Therapeutic Purposes." He was awarded many honorary degrees from British and foreign universities, including the University of São Paulo in Brazil. He won the Gold Medal of the Royal Society of Medicine in 1947. He became a commander of the French Legion of Honor in 1946 and was awarded the American Medal for Merit in 1948 and the James Smithson Medal in 1965. Florey was elected to the United States National Academy of Sciences and the American Philosophical Society in 1963, and was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences the following year. He became an honorary fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons in 1961. On February 4, 1965, Florey was created a life peer and became Baron Florey of Adelaide in the Commonwealth of Australia and of Marston in the city of Oxford. This was a higher honour than the knighthood awarded to Sir Alexander Fleming, and it recognised the monumental work Florey had done in making penicillin available in sufficient quantities to save millions of lives. He was formally introduced to the House of Lords in April, sponsored by Lord Cottesloe, Margaret Jennings's brother, and Lord Adrian, one of Florey's predecessors as President of the Royal Society. On July 15, 1965, he was appointed a member of the Order of Merit. Florey published his last scientific paper, co-written with Jennings, in 1967. He had written or co-written over 200 papers. He died at his home at the Provost's lodgings of congestive heart failure on 21 February 1968. Although Florey was an agnostic, a funeral service was held in the St Nicholas's Parish Church in Marston. A memorial plaque was placed on the outside wall near the entrance. The church refused to allow it to be placed inside because Florey had been so outspoken in his disbelief. A larger service at Westminster Abbey in London was attended by about 500 people. His remains were cremated. In 1980, Lady Hamilton Fairley, the widow of Sir Neil Hamilton Fairley, began a campaign to have a memorial to Florey in London. The Premier of South Australia, David Tonkin, agreed to provide South Australian marble for a memorial stone. South Australian sculptor Paul Trapp was commissioned to engrave it from a design by John Peters. The 60 by 90 centimetre stone was flown to London by the Royal Australian Air Force and unveiled by Lady Margaret Florey on 2 November 1981. The inscription on the stone reads, "In grateful memory of Howard Walter Baron Florey, whom his vision, leadership and research made penicillin available to mankind. Born Adelaide, 1898, died Oxford, 1968." Florey's portrait appeared on the Australian $50 note for 22 years between 1973 and 1995. The note also depicted the Sir William Dunn School of Pathology, penicillin notatum, mice used in penicillin experiments, colonies of mould inhibiting bacterial growth on a petri dish, and Heatley's assay method. The street of Florey Drive and suburb of Florey in the Australian Capital Territory, the Florey Institute of Neuroscience and Mental Health at the University of Melbourne, Victoria, the Florey unit of the Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading, Berkshire, The Florey Institute for Host Pathogen Interactions at the University of Sheffield and a lecture theatre in the University of Adelaide's Medical School are named after him. The electoral district of Florey, a single-member electoral district for the South Australian House of Assembly, is also named after him. It was estimated that the development of penicillin saved over 80 million lives. Howard Florey may have left this world in 1968, but the legacy of his life-saving breakthrough lives on every time an infection is treated. He didn't just change science, he gave humanity a second chance. Remember his name. Penicillin, the Magic Bullet is a 2006 Australian film production written by Gordon Glenn and financed by the Film Finance Corporation and Archimedia Productions in association with Film Victoria. Breaking the Mold is a 2009 historical drama that tells the story of the development of penicillin in the 1930s and 40s by the group of scientists at Oxford headed by Florey at the William Dunn School of Pathology. The film stars Dominic West as Florey, Dennis Lawson as Fleming, and Oliver Dimsdale as Chain, and was written by Kate Brooke and directed by Peter Hoare.